Fait accompli, to italicize, or not to italicize. Background. I was looking up the rule about italicizing foreign phrases and found an apparent consensus that the criterion is if the phrase is familiar. Well, who gets to decide that? I know perfectly well what fait accompli means, and I don't know French. So I recently chose to not italicize it, but someone had a different opinion. Here is a summary of my findings. Wikipedia suggests loanwords are phrases that have common use in English, however, Praetor, Gestapo, Samurai, Esprit de corps, for example, i.e. do not require italicization. If looking for a good rule of thumb, do not italicize words that appear in Merriam-Webster online. The University of Minnesota recommends italicize isolated words and phrases in a foreign language if they are likely to be unfamiliar to the reader. Capital Community College Foundation Guide to Grammar and Writing says, if a word or phrase has become so widely used and understood that it has become part of the English language, such as the French bon voyage or the abbreviation for the Latin etc., we would not italicize it. Often this becomes a matter of private judgment and context. For instance, whether you italicize the Italian sotto voce depends largely on your audience and your subject matter. University of Sussex Guide to Punctuation Notes. If you are not sure which foreign words and phrases are usually written in italics, consult a good dictionary. Fait accompli appears unitalicized in Merriam-Webster online. I was not able to find an online English dictionary that was different. I don't have access to the OED. Question. Is fait accompli likely to be familiar to readers here? Is this a good guideline to use for choosing whether to italicize it? Or is the fact that it is in English dictionaries unitalicized enough? Or is the fact that it is in English dictionaries, at all, enough? Note, I recognize that italics are appropriate when referring to a phrase rather than instantiating it, in any language. I've instead chosen in this question to use quotes to clearly separate the issues. Edits to correct grammar welcome. No comments necessary.
I think this is a case where authors can decide for themselves where to draw the line. Or, if the writing is for a certain publication, the editors will have a policy for whether a given word should or should not be italicized.
Since fait accompli functions in English as one word, but is written as two, I'd be inclined to keep it italicized. If nothing else, it's a handy hint for anyone who decides to look it up in a dictionary that they should look up the two words together.
The OED has examples both in italicized form, from 1845, and non-italicized form, from 1895. If you are using naturalization as a standard, it lists fait accompli as a not naturalized, alien word. However, I'd agree with you that a word's presence in dictionaries isn't a great gauge of how well an audience understands it as native. Even so, I'd assume that most readers here would be relatively familiar with fait accompli. And I doubt there's much you could do to change this.
Here's one more perspective. Turabian/Chicago, a very good style guide, says, italicize isolated words and phrases in foreign languages likely to be unfamiliar to readers of English, and capitalize them as in their language. Do not italicize foreign terms familiar enough to appear in Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. p. 312. Fait accompli does, strictly speaking, appear in Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, and the formatting of the inclusion here suggests to me that it has, indeed, its own entry. Although I said before that there was no independent entry in the volume, I now have my doubts. The New Yorker doesn't italicize fait accompli. If you want to follow Chicago style to the letter, you shouldn't, either. But I think your choice would be defensible either way.
I think it depends on who your target is. Ask yourself if they would know for sure or not and write accordingly.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.